She said no man could survive her touch. The human held her anyway. The citadel of the Cinder Dominion wasn't built. It was imposed upon the jagged crust of the dead world it orbited. A monolithic spear of obsidian glass and cold iron, it pierced the void, a testament to a species that had conquered everything but their own fear. Jesse stood in the cavernous docking bay, his breath misting in the recycled air. He adjusted the collar of his standard-issue diplomatic tunic, a simple gray that seemed almost offensively dull against the Dominion's opulent, menacing architecture. Around him, Cinder guards in armor that looked like flayed metal stood motionless, their faces hidden behind sleek, featureless helms. They radiated hostility, but Jesse didn't flinch. He let his gaze drift, taking in the sterile perfection, the oppressive silence. "You are small," a voice rasped, echoing from the shadows. Elder Varkos stepped into the light. He was exactly as the briefing dossiers had described. Skeletal, his skin the color of ash, draped in robes that seemed too heavy for his frail frame. But his eyes were sharp, glittering with a predatory intelligence. "Compact," Jesse corrected, his voice level. "Efficiency is a virtue, Elder." Varkos made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "Efficiency, a quaint human concept. You are here to die, Nexus-Mediator. The Archon does not receive guests. She receives victims." "I'm not here to be a victim," Jesse said, stepping forward. "I'm here to talk. The Aether-Protocol is waiting." "Talk," Varkos sneered. "Words are wind. The scourge is absolute. One touch and your mind will be flayed from your skull. You will freeze in a scream that never ends. We have seen it. We have tested it." "Then let's skip the pleasantries," Jesse said. "Take me to her." Varkos gestured with a bony hand. "As you wish. The cage awaits." They led him deep into the citadel, through corridors that hummed with containment fields. Finally, they reached the sanctum. It was a vast, circular chamber, the walls lined with pulsing dampeners. In the center, separated by a shimmering refractive field, sat Zelora. She was breathtaking, terrifying. Her skin was a pale, shimmering bronze like polished obsidian caught in moonlight. It seemed to hold a light of its own, a cold internal luminescence. Her hair was long, thick, and white gold, falling in a liquid cascade around her shoulders, framing a face of alien, severe beauty. Her large, expressive eyes were a vibrant amethyst, but they were filled with a profound, crushing sadness. She wore complex, dark fabric garments interwoven with fine metallic threads that shimmered as she moved, barely concealing the raw power radiating from her form. She looked up as Jesse entered, her gaze locking onto his. Even through the field he felt it, a pressure, a static charge against his temples. "Another sacrifice." Her voice was melodious but cold, amplified by the room's acoustics. "Varkos, your cruelty has become boring." "Not a sacrifice, Archon," Jesse said, stepping up to the barrier. He kept his hands visible, his posture open. "A mediator, my name is Jesse." Zelora tilted her head, her amethyst eyes narrowing. She stood, her movements fluid and predatory. "A human, frail, short-lived. Why are you here, Jesse?" "To offer a hand," Jesse said simply. "A hand," Zelora laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "To touch me is to cease to exist. Do you not value your life?" "I value peace," Jesse replied, holding her gaze. He didn't flinch as she moved closer to the field, her presence looming. He saw the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers curled into fists. It wasn't hatred. It was fear. "And I think you do too." The days that followed were a battle of wills fought in silence and static. Jesse refused the Dominion's offer of remote quarters, insisting on staying in the observation antechamber adjoining the sanctum. He slept on a cot, ate their tasteless nutrient paste, and spent every waking hour at the glass, just watching. He saw the way Zelora paced, a caged tiger. He saw the tremors in her hands when she thought no one was looking. He saw the loneliness that radiated off her like heat. "Why do you stay?" she asked one day, her voice projecting into his room. She hadn't looked at him for hours. "Because you're alone," Jesse said. He was sitting on the floor, back against the barrier, reading a datapad. "And no one should be alone in a cage." "I am not in a cage. I am the Archon. This is my sanctuary." It's a prison, Zelora. Call it what it is. She whirled on him, and the refractive field hissed. A wave of dizziness hit Jessie, a sharp spike of nausea. The Synaptic Cascade. It was leaking just a fraction. You feel it, she hissed. The rot, the sickness, it wants to consume you. Jessie took a breath, centering himself. He used the techniques he'd trained for years, Ego-Stabilization. He acknowledged the nausea, the fear, and then he let them pass, anchoring himself in the present. I feel you, he corrected. I feel your frustration, your anger, it's loud. Zelora froze. You interpret the scourge as emotion. It's not a scourge, Jessie said, standing up and turning to face her. The dizziness was fatting. It's a scream. You're screaming, Zelora, and everyone else is just covering their ears. My mind is poison, she whispered, stepping closer to the glass. It breaks things. It hasn't broken me, Jessie said softly. Yet. Let me in, Jessie said. Not physically, mentally. Drop the comms, speak to me directly. Mind to mind, I know you can do it. It will kill you. Let me decide that. Zelora hesitated. Then slowly she closed her eyes. Jessie felt the pressure build, a physical weight on his chest. And then a voice, clear and resonant, echoed in his skull. Human. It wasn't just a word. It was a sensation, cold, sharp, curious. Jessie, he projected back, wrapping the thought in a memory of a warm sun on a beach, the sound of waves. A grounding image. Zelora gasped, her eyes flying open. Warmth, why? Because you're cold, Jessie thought, and I have warmth to spare. The mental link became their lifeline. For weeks, they spoke without words. Zelora showed him the stark, terrifying beauty of the Cinder homeworld before the darkening. She showed him the moment her power manifested, a childhood tantrum that left her nursemaid catatonic. She shared the crushing guilt, the certainty that she was a monster. In return, Jessie showed her Earth. Not the cities or the wars, but the small things. The smell of rain on hot asphalt. The taste of a ripe peach. The feeling of holding a dog. He showed her his own fears, his own failures. He let her see his messy, contradictory humanity. He saw her change. The tension in her shoulders lessened. The amethyst eyes lost some of their hardness. She began to lower the refractive field's opacity, letting him see her clearly. She was magnificent. The ridges on her forehead, the intricate bioluminescent patterns on her skin, they weren't deformities, they were art. Her alien features, so sharp and distinct, held a vulnerability that made his chest ache. You are strange, she projected one evening. She was sitting by the barrier, her hand pressed against the glass. Jessie sat on the other side, his hand matching hers. In a good way, I hope. You are not afraid. Why? Fear is data, Jessie thought. It tells you what's dangerous. You're dangerous, Zelora, but you're not malicious. There's a difference. The Council says I am a weapon, that I must be contained until I can be aimed. The Council is afraid, Jessie replied. They see a weapon. I see a woman who's been holding her breath for 20 years. If I exhale, I destroy. Maybe, Jessie thought, or maybe you just need someone strong enough to catch the wind. Zelora looked at him, and for the first time, Jessie saw a flicker of something new in her eyes. Not fear, not anger, hope, and beneath it, a hunger that mirrored his own. The frequency analysis is ready, Jessie told Varkos. We need a controlled release, a micro-cascade. If I can map the resonance, we can build a damper that actually works. She won't have to be isolated. Varkos looked at the data pad, his face unreadable. A cure. We did not ask for a cure, Mediator. We asked for a treaty. The treaty depends on the Archon, Jessie said, and the Archon depends on this. Varkos sneered but nodded. Very well, proceed. The test was set for the following cycle. Zelora was terrified. I can't control it, she projected, her mind a storm of anxiety. I'll be right here, Jessie promised. Behind the shield, just let a little out. Focus on me, focus on the warmth. The chamber was sealed. Jessie stood behind the heavy blast glass of the observation deck. Zelora sat in the center of the sanctum, eyes closed, breathing deeply. Initiating stimulus, Akkad, the chief bioengineer, announced. A low hum filled the room. Zelora flinched. The energy around her began to spike. Purple arcs of lightning crackled across her skin. Focus, Zelora, Jessie projected. Just a little. She was trying. He could feel her restraint, a dam holding back a tsunami. But then the hum pitch shifted. It became a shriek. What's happening? Jessie shouted. That's too high. Equipment malfunction, Varkos said smoothly, his hand hovering over the console. Regrettable. Jessie saw the truth in the elder's eyes. It wasn't a malfunction. It was an assassination. Jessie, Zelora screamed in his mind. The dam broke. A shockwave of pure, violet energy exploded from her. It slammed into the containment field, shattering the dampeners. The blast glass cracked. Run, Zelora cried, I can't stop it. The Synaptic Cascade wasn't just energy. It was pure, distilled trauma. It washed over the room, instantly dropping the guards. They didn't die, they just stopped, their minds locked in a loop of terror. Varkos had already fled. Jessie was alone, the glass shattered. The air in the sanctum was thick, vibrating with a sound that wasn't sound. It was the hum of 1,000 screaming minds. Zelora was on her knees, hands clutching her head, the energy pouring off her in waves. She was dissolving, her physical form wavering as her mind tore itself apart. Jessie stood at the edge of the shattered observation deck. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to seal the door, to survive. But he looked at her. He saw the woman beneath the monster the council had made. He saw the person who had cried over the memory of a dead bird. He didn't run. He jumped. He landed in the sanctum, the impact jarring his teeth. The air felt like sandpaper against his skin. The mental pressure was immense, a physical weight trying to crush his skull. Ego-Stabilization. Center. Ground. Breathe. He forced one foot in front of the other. Jessie, no. Zelora's thought was a jagged shard of panic. Get away. Not this time, Jessie gritted out, fighting the wind of her psychic storm. Not ever again. He reached her. The energy burned, a cold fire that seemed to freeze his blood and boil it at the same time. He pushed through the final layer of her defensive field. He grabbed her. He pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, his hands tangling in her white gold hair. The world vanished. The cascade hit him. It wasn't pain. It was everything. It was every moment of fear Zelora had ever felt, every second of isolation, every drop of self-loathing. It was a tidal wave of existential dread, a black hole trying to suck his consciousness into nothingness. Jessie didn't fight it. He didn't try to block it. He accepted it. I see you, he projected, shouting the thought into the roaring void. I see all of it, and I'm not leaving. He used his mind like a lens, focusing all that chaos, all that pain into a single point. And at that point, he placed a single, unshakable truth. You are loved. Time dissolved. There was no room, no citadel, no council. There was only the void. They were floating in a sea of violet and black. Jessie felt his own memories bleeding out, the smell of his mother's cooking, the pain of a broken leg, the thrill of his first solo flight. Zelora was absorbing it all, drinking his humanity like water in a desert. And he was drinking her. He felt the cold, crystalline structure of her mind, the rigid discipline, the terrifying power. He felt the alien geometry of her thoughts. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. You are chaotic, she whispered in the void. Her presence was everywhere, wrapping around his soul. I'm human, he replied. We're messy. You are hurting. I'm holding on. Why? Because you're worth it. He felt her shock. It rippled through the void, changing the colors from violet to a soft, warm gold. The screaming stopped. The dread receded, replaced by a profound, ringing silence. In that silence, they found each other. Stripped of bodies, of status, of history, they were just two sparks in the dark, clinging to each other for warmth. It was an intimacy deeper than touch, deeper than sex. It was the absolute intermingling of essence. He felt her surrender. Not to death, but to him. She let go of the control she'd maintained for decades. She let the walls fall. And Jessie held her up. Sensations returned slowly. The hardness of the floor, the smell of ozone and sweat, the sound of ragged breathing. Jessie opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor of the sanctum. His body felt like it had been run over by a hauler. Every muscle ached. His head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic pain. But he was alive. And he was not alone. Zelora was draped over him, her head resting on his chest. She was trembling, but it wasn't the violent shaking of the cascade. It was the shivering of someone who had just come in from the cold. She lifted her head. Her amethyst eyes were wide, filled with wonder. She reached out a hand, hesitating, then touched his cheek. Her skin was cool, smooth. "You're warm," she whispered aloud. Her voice was raspy. "Still here," Jessie croaked. He tried to sit up, but his arms wouldn't cooperate. Zelora moved, shifting her weight to support him. She ran her hands over his shoulders, his arms, as if checking for cracks. The touch was electric, sending shivers through his exhausted nerves. It wasn't painful. It was right. "How?" she asked. "Stubbornness," Jessie managed a weak grin. The doors to the sanctum hissed open. Varkos stood there, flanked by a squad of heavy guard. Akkad was behind him, staring at her datapad in disbelief. "Impossible," Varkos spat. "He should be a husk. She should be dead." Zelora stood up. She helped Jessie to his feet, keeping her arm around his waist. She turned to the council elder. The vulnerability was gone. In its place was a cold, terrifying regalness. But this time it wasn't brittle. It was solid. "The human lives," Zelora announced, her voice ringing with power. "The cascade is broken, and so is your hold on me." Varkos took a step back, fear flickering in his eyes. "He is an anomaly, a mutant. He must be destroyed." "Touch him," Zelora said softly, "and I will show you what a true weapon looks like." The guards didn't move. They looked from the terrified elder to the glowing Archon, and they lowered their weapons. The recovery was slow, but pleasant. Zelora had Jessie moved to her private chambers, a suite of rooms high in the spire, filled with soft light and actual fabrics, a stark contrast to the rest of the citadel. They spent days just talking. The Aether-Protocol sat on a table between them, a physical manifestation of their victory, but it was secondary now. "You realized," Jessie said, sipping a cup of hot, spiced tea, "that Varkos sabotaged the dampeners." Zelora nodded. She was sitting opposite him on a plush divan, wearing a simple robe that left her arms bare. She couldn't stop looking at him. "I suspected. He feared the treaty would dilute his power. He needed me isolated, a monster. He failed. Because of you." She reached across the table, taking his hand. Her fingers interlaced with his. The sensation was still overwhelming, a constant, low-level hum of psychic connection that made the hair on his arms stand up. "You saw me, when I was nothing but noise." "I heard the music and the noise," Jessie said. Zelora stood and moved around the table. She sat beside him, closing the distance. She reached up and traced the line of his jaw. "Your mind, it is so loud, so many thoughts at once. How do you stand it?" "We get used to it," Jessie said, leaning into her touch. "It's called being human." "I like it," she whispered. She leaned closer, her amethyst eyes searching his. "It drowns out the silence." She kissed him. It was tentative at first, a question. But when Jessie responded, wrapping his arm around her waist and pulling her flush against him, the question became an answer. Her lips were cool, but her mouth was hot. The psychic link flared, sending a rush of euphoria through both of them. It was a feedback loop of desire and affection, amplifying every touch, every breath. "The protocol," she murmured against his lips. "We must sign it." "Later," Jessie mumbled, pulling her closer. "Let Varkos sweat a little longer." The signing ceremony was a formality. Varkos had been retired to a remote research station. The High Council, cowed by Zelora's newfound control and the presence of the human fleet that had just warped in, was eager to cooperate. But the real celebration happened that night. Zelora's chambers were dim, lit only by the bioluminescent plants she cultivated. She stood by the window, looking out at the stars. She wore nothing but the moonlight. Her skin shimmered, the alien markings glowing softly. Jesse walked up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against him. He felt the tension in her back, the lingering fear. "It's gone, Zelora," he whispered into her ear. "The cage is gone." "Is it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What if it comes back? What if I hurt you?" "You won't," Jesse said firmly. He turned her around. "We're anchored now, you and me. Ego-Stabilization, remember. You're the kite, I'm the string." She smiled, a genuine, dazzling expression that transformed her face. "A string. You are much more than a string, Jesse." She pulled him to the bed. The lovemaking was unlike anything Jesse had ever experienced. It wasn't just physical. With every touch, every caress, their minds brushed against each other. He felt her pleasure as if it were his own, a bright, soaring crescendo. He felt her awe at the sensations, the friction of skin, the heat of bodies, the simple, profound joy of contact. For Zelora, it was a revelation. For her entire life, touch had meant death. Now it meant life. It meant connection. She explored him with a desperate hunger, memorizing every scar, every muscle. She marveled at the resilience of his human form, the way he could take her strength and not break. When the climax came, it was a shared event, a psychic supernova that left them both breathless, tangled together in the sheets, their minds slowly drifting back to their separate bodies. Jesse held her as her breathing slowed. He kissed the top of her head. "I love you," he projected, loud and clear. Zelora stiffened, then melted. "I love you," she sent back, the thought colored with a fierce, protective gold. 6 months later, Jesse stood on the balcony of the Citadel, watching the traffic lanes. They were busy. Human haulers mixed with Dominion cruisers. The Aether-Protocol was in full effect. The Cinder Dominion was opening up, slowly but surely. Zelora stepped out beside him. She wore her Archon's robes, but they were different now, lighter, less restrictive. She looked healthy, vibrant. The shadows under her eyes were gone. "They say the council is planning to nominate a human for the new advisory board," she said, leaning against the railing. "Poor guy," Jesse laughed. "They talk too much." "I was thinking of nominating you." Jesse groaned. "I'm a mediator, Zelora, not a politician. I prefer field work." "Field work?" She raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her amethyst eyes. She stepped closer, her hip bumping his. "Is that what we're calling it now?" "Essential diplomatic relations," Jesse corrected, sliding his arm around her. She rested her head on his shoulder. They looked out at the galaxy together. It was a big, cold, dangerous place. But standing there, holding the woman who could kill with a touch but chose to love instead, Jesse had never felt warmer. "We changed it," Zelora said softly. "Everything." "We did," Jesse agreed. He squeezed her shoulder. "And we're just getting started." He looked at her, at the alien beauty that had once terrified a galaxy, and saw only his partner. The Archon and the human, the anchor and the storm. "Ready for the next meeting?" he asked. Zelora smiled, and the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. "With you," she said, "always."